Good morning, everybody. My name's Julia Peyton-Jones, and I'm delighted to welcome you for tea today with Iwona Blazwick, who is Director of the Whitechapel Gallery, London, since 2001, formerly Head of Exhibitions and Displays at Tate Modern, and Director of Exhibitions at London's ICA. She's been an independent curator for 2 European capitals of culture and exhibitions and public art projects in Europe, America, and Japan. As well as collaborating on shows, commissions, and books with artists from all around the world, she curates thematic exhibitions that seek to define the zeitgeist or to expand the art historical canon. Founding Commissioner for Contemporary Art at atPhaidon Press, she is currently Series Editor of Whitechapel Art Gallery, MIT Press Documents of Contemporary Art, and has published extensively on artists and the institutions of art. She is an advisor for the Fourth Plinth, the Istanbul Biennale, the JarmanAward and Sculpture in the City. One of the things that I find so fascinating about Iwona, who I've known for many years now, is her discovery of Damien Hirst, as it says in her Wikipedia entry, and the fact that she staged his first solo show in a public gallery in London at the ICA in 1992, a year after I arrived at the Serpentine. Damien is, in a way, I feel he's like a contemporary. Of course, he's not, but he started his career, his long collaboration with J. Jopling at White Cube at the same time as I began at the Whitechapel. And I remember that one of the first 2 shows I curated at the gallery included a piece by Damien, and during the installation, Damien and Jay came to have a look at it. And it was really one of those moments that I remember incredibly well. But there's another reason why, for me, Damien holds such an extraordinary position, quite apart from his significance and his extraordinary contribution to contemporary art, is the exhibition he organised in 1988, Freeze, which was him and 16 other artists, many of whom were his contemporaries at Goldsmiths. And he took over a disused warehouse in the Surrey Docks, which is sited between Bermondsey and Canary Wharf. He organised a catalogue. He also organised curators and directors, collectors to go and visit it, to ensure that it had the widest possible following, I suppose, and visibility. It informed me hugely because I felt that this was a supreme example of, if you don't like the system, then make your own system. And that is an empowering position to have. So when I was finding my way in those early days at the Serpentine, when Iwona, hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, I've got my tea, my Earl Grey ready.
Oh, well done. I've got builders. Let me salute you. I've just been talking about how you brilliantly, I don't know if you heard any of it, discovered Damien, and saying how important the Freeze exhibition was for me and how it really informed how I thought about art, how I thought about curating, how I thought about actually making things happen, even if on the face of it, that it was impossible. But now you're here. Please tell us how you discovered him. Did you see him in his work in a show? Did you go to his studio? How did you do it?
Well, actually, it was through New Contemporaries, which, for those who don't know that show, it's been running for 6 years, I think. It's a huge national open submission to students, art students who, in their final year or have just left. And I was on the jury with, I think, Michael Craig Martin and I think Nick Logsdale and a whole group of people. And this
Iwona, may I interrupt you a second? These are crucial to life, the earphones. Do you have yours by any chance? Because you're cutting up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Shall I run and get them? Sorry, you carry on.
Okay. Whenever I was in a tight hole at the Serpentine, I almost thought, what would Damien have done? Because it's this idea that when things get tricky, you don't sort of collapse and think, how am I going to deal with it? Well, you may, and indeed on many occasions I did, but it was more to do with, don't take the system as a given. Look at ways of creating your own system. So in the early days of the Serpentine, it was a possibility of maybe going and trying to secure more funding from the Arts Council, hooray! Or getting sponsorship for projects. And I took the route of going to get money and support for what our work from sponsorship rather than the public sector. But that was very much as an influence of Damien's leadership, I suppose, in a way you could say, that started with that amazing frieze exhibition. But now tell us, so you were judging the new contemporaries. Of course, it's an incredibly important platform for artists whose work hasn't been seen. So tell us more.
Yeah, so he presented a cabinet full of drugs, basically, but beautifully labelled. It wasn't like an objet trouvé. It wasn't like a surrealist work of found things. It was pristine, impeccable, brand new, everything still in its packaging. And the drugs, the pharmaceutical drugs, somehow corresponded to the body. So on the top shelf there were aspirins and ibuprofen, and it went down through the body, you know, cough pastils, then things to settle the tummy and so forth. It was astonishing, and we just thought, this is the most extraordinary kind of figurative art I've ever seen. It was partly its newness, the fact that it was really about the branding on the packages as much as the intellectual concept of it. And that was Damien Hirst. And so then, of course, Frieze came along. And I really agree with you that he was such a hugely disruptive force, because he just wasn't going to wait for the official institutions to come, as everybody was, in a way, waiting to be discovered by a tiny group of curators in a handful of institutions in London. And he and his generation said, no, fuck that. We're going to do it for ourselves. We're going to shape our own destiny. The other thing about Damien, I think, was his tremendously collegiate spirit. You know, he invited everyone in that year at Goldsmiths College to take part in that exhibition. And as we know, it was a stellar generation, which really changed the British art scene. But I agree with you. I think it was that entrepreneurial refusal to be cowed or to have to wait, to be passive, to, you know, rely on institutions or galleries. And I think that was a lesson to everybody. And after that, we saw a huge flowering of artist-run spaces like City Racing, which was in an old betting shop. Bank, lots and lots of groups just took matters into their own hands and shook up a very dull, very kind of narrow art world.
It was hugely exciting. It was the audacity of it that was so shocking, I think. It went against the establishment in such an extreme way, but such an intelligent way. And just briefly, I talked about before you came on, an exhibition that we organised at the Serpentine called Broken English, which I co-curated with Andrew Graham Dixon and Andrea Schleicher. And one of the pieces, away from the flock, a piece that we borrowed from Charles Saatchi, was vandalised, and ink was put in the formaldehyde. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, the Crown Public Prosecution Service insisted on prosecuting the artists that did it. And so Damien, we all had to go off to court. And Damien did the most virtuoso display in the witness box. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Story.
It was phenomenal. But it was phenomenal because, firstly, he was not in the least intimidated by being there. He took the situation on his own terms. He answered the questions both politely. I mean, he wasn't screaming and shouting or being rude. But he was also absolutely so sophisticated, witty, intelligent, and amusing. And so it made it. I just thought, okay, this respect. This guy is going to go to the tops, you know, and beyond, and beyond.
Yeah.
the next thing that I want to talk to you about, so then you followed him, you did the show at the ICA, you became friends probably, and followed him ever since, included him in other shows thereafter?
Yes, in fact, I was invited to curate an exhibition in Rome by my very dear friend Caroline Christoph Beccaria.
Yes,
and it was called Molteplici Culture, and we had a group of different curators were invited to choose 2 artists, and I selected Damien and Von Fanit. And we were given half of a convent in the middle of Rome, and we installed Damien's fish swimming in the same direction. So if you recall that work, I think it's about 50 little tanks, formaldehyde, where all the fish are separate, but also all moving in the same direction. So it's a fantastic kind of comment on a kind of existential sense of being in a crowd, but being alone at the same time. And also because Rome is full of antiquities and cabinets of curiosity, it just seemed like the perfect work of art for that show.
Now, wonderful roadie who you met earlier when we did our rehearsal has asked if you could kindly point your camera down more, because we've put for the first time, that's better, a little bit more, yay, because we put for the first time a strapline saying who you are, director of the Whitechapel, for people who for people who join halfway through and maybe are not so familiar with your work, so that they will always know who you are. So thank you, that makes a big difference. So how are you, and how is your family in these tumultuous times?
Well, we're all working remotely. So my partner, Richard Noble, who's head of Goldsmiths College, actually, he's struggling, as all of the art schools are, with thinking how they can honour commitment to students to have degree shows and to begin a new academic year. So it's hugely testing, and I think everybody feels bitterly disappointed that the great annual summer degree shows just can't happen, or they're happening online. So it's been a very tough year for students, and I think I gather Goldsmiths are committed to doing a show later, because we're all living via our screens, but actually there is no substitute for this, for the actual physical engagement with art. So that is, I think, proving for all of the community in the art schools across Britain, the big challenge is how to let students have that opportunity to meet their public, to meet the world.
Of course. And after working so intensely and for a period of 3 years, there's a summation of everything, you know, they've been focusing on. Of course, I mean, horrible. I mean, it also applies to university students. I mean, I know art schools are universities now, but it's all students who are graduating, really.
So it's been a tough year for young people, and they are being, you know, forced to live in parents' bedrooms or with friends and miss out on the whole student experience. So my daughter is at Bristol University, but here in North London, and with all her cohort having to do things remotely. I think and for the Whitechapel Gallery, like all our colleagues, we're behind, you know, we've closed the doors of the gallery. But I actually had the pleasure of going, of course, we're doing security checks all the time. And I went on one of those security visits. And honestly, Julia, it was like going to the Oasis. To be in a gallery, everything is still there. This great painting show, Radical Figures, is still there.
Yes, let me show everybody the catalogue. I mean, it's a fantastic show, brilliant.
Thank you so much. And they're like sleeping beauties, and we hope to kiss them awake in July. But it was I realised the deep sensual pleasure of being with a physical work of art was something that I needed. And it was like drinking from the Oasis. It was really an amazing experience that we're all missing. On the other hand, sorry.
No, well, I was just going to say the show struck such a chord, and there are a few things that I want to ask you about. Firstly, why do you think it struck such a chord with the public, but as well as the critics? And also importantly, in what way do you think the show is radical? Because the title is fantastic. you know, radical figures. But I think, okay, so tell me more, because I'm struggling with the radical thing a little bit.
Yeah, I think certainly we've seen over the last decade this huge flowering of work, moving image work. And without question, I think it has dominated, and rightly so, as young artists particularly, or older generation artists who were working in video, a form which was very difficult for the market to respond to. So there have been great figures like, say, Arthur Jaffa, who really was under the radar because it wasn't something galleries could sell that easily. So a lot of older artists working in film worked unrecognised and have come to the fore. And a lot of young artists, also we ourselves in our daily lives, are ruled and dominated by technology, by the screen, even more so
and
now.
Congratulations being your first time on this. Amazing.
I know, it's so exciting.
It's brilliant. Thank you for doing that.
So, well, thank you for getting me on Instagram.
It's a pleasure.
So I think in the meantime, as we know, these things swing. And as a consequence of that digital universe that we're all occupying, there's been a huge surge of interest in tactility. We've seen a massive interest in ceramics, for example, textiles, things to do with making with the hand. And, of course, alongside that is painting. Yeah. And I think the sheer pleasure of the visceral quality, the qualities of paint on fabric has come back to the fore. It's also coincided with a kind of new cohort, if you like, of artists who are returning to figuration. And we, in the exhibition, we also make reference to a show from 1981 called The New Spirit in Painting.
Curated by Norman Rosenthal and
Christos Iokimedes.
Exactly, I got the Iokimedes and Nick Sirota. Yes, exactly. Nick's very often not included in that lineup.
So it was a similar moment where there was a great dominance of conceptual art, minimalism, sculpture, and so forth, and there was this sudden surge of interest in figurative painting. And at that time, we saw the work of people like Anselm Kiefer, for example, Georg Baselitz, Francesco Clemente. Many artists actually who then went and had solo exhibitions at the Whitechapel Gallery, Julian Schnabel, for example. And I think we've got a similar moment of a resurgence of interest in figuration, but infused with a new political sensibility. Now, one of the shocking things really about New Spirit in Painting, glorious though it was, and I, as a baby curator, visited that show and was blown away by the sheer scale, the bravado of it.
And it felt so new. It felt so new and radical and out there. It was an astonishing experience.
Yes. With one small factor of pure conservatism, there wasn't a single female artist.
Yes,
And when you think back on that, it's shocking. Neither were there any artists of colour. And yet, of course, they were there. It was a kind of moment of myopia, and it took many years for that to break open. So if you look at the cohort in Radical Figures, you'll see that it's 50-50 men and women, and also we've seen artists of colour who are reclaiming aspects of figurative painting in a radical way. So we've seen, of course, painters like Lynette Yadimboaki take back portraiture, which has been, I guess, traditionally associated with capturing great figures, aristocratic families, the great swagger portraits, that whole tradition in art history. She and other artists have taken that genre and focused it on everyday people. So I think there's a politics in that. Our exhibition is really more about expressionism. And what we see is expressionist gestural painting, which is looking not only at history, but also memory and subjectivity, most importantly. So we're looking at, for example, Black identity, we're looking at sexuality, we're looking at queer sexuality and how that physical state and existential states can be expressed through figurative painting. So there's a lot going on.
Yes, it's extraordinary. And the catalogue's very handsome and also wonderfully clear, which is not always the case.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to actually quote, it relates to what you first said, there's a marvelous quote by Daniel Richter, who is one of the artists in the exhibition. He has 4 works, and if I may, I'm going to put up some of his paintings, 2 of his paintings in the exhibition, and also work by Carlos Bongo, who has a fantastic installation at the Whitechapel at the same time. Because it's very difficult, I think, to articulate why it's so important to stand in front of a work of art, why there is no experience that can possibly supplant this. And Daniel speaks about it very well, and also what art can do to all of us. He says, artworks are mostly interesting when they seek to convey something to the viewer that is not entirely translatable through language or even reason. When art fulfills its promise, it expands something within us and offers some kind of truth, whatever construction that may be. And I thought it was absolutely, it's so straightforward yet profound about why my whole career has been in the arts. I mean, it's something which is in my DNA. It's, you know, if you cut me open, you're going to find it. But he speaks very well about that. And the 2 paintings that we've got up, as I say, 2 of 4, amongst many others. And when we talked earlier in our preparation for this conversation, you were saying what it was like to go and visit the empty gallery and to look at works. And you talked really wonderfully about one of the paintings. And I just wondered if you would just talk a little more about Richter, but also all the artists in the show, or any others that you particularly want to mention.
Well, the work that we have up at the moment, which I think is called Asger, Mark and Bill, is that right?
It's Asger, Bill and Mark.
Asger, Bill and Mark. So yeah. Asger refers to Asger Jorn.
Yes, of course.
Bill is Willem de Kooning, and Mark is Mark Rothko. So he's a mid-career artist paying tribute to some of his forefathers, if you like. And it's an amazing work because it's quite, there's moments of abstraction. You see these wonderful washes of colours. So you've got the reference to colour field painting, but also these contorted figures, which are in some ways pure gesture, pure brushstroke, but at the same time have anthropomorphic elements to them. So it's quite a complex painting. It has a real sense of depth and space, this sense of a kind of blue, sea-like environment, and at the same time a sort of struggle that's going on at the centre of the canvas. And this is the work that I was standing in front of last week in the empty gallery, and being bedazzled really by the vivid palette, the sense of motion and interaction between the 3 figurative elements, and an incredible sense of space and dimension of the painting. And you realise that it's static, it's a device, it's pigment on canvas, and yet it can hold us, engage us with such power. It's a big scale painting as well, and I think that's the other aspect of many of the works in the exhibition. Cecily Brown also works on this heroic scale. So they're really they're creating a whole environment that immerses the viewer. And I think there's a kind of bold, powerful aspect to all of the artists in this exhibition.
No, I think really congratulations, because doing so to speak, doing a painting show is challenging, and it combined a fantastic sense of surprise with also just sheer enjoyment of looking at such wonderful things. And you know, exhibitions are supposed to be pleasurable. They may make us work very hard on occasion, but it's also something that one needs to connect with, and it was very true for that show. So when do you plan to reopen the gallery? Do you have a date yet, or is it still in the making?
Well, if we get permission from government, we're hoping something around the 7th of July. Certainly,
fantastic.
Various colleagues are talking about that across the sector.
Yeah.
And it might be that we try and work together. So different institutions in different parts of the cities might coordinate openings. It's been great to have a conversation with all our colleagues about how we can, get back and make people feel safe to return.
Yeah.
One of the great things about galleries is that you can move freely, you don't have to congregate, and you don't have to be in a confined space. You can, and it's not a time-based thing, you can move through the work, through the spaces, through the works of art. So I think it's a very safe environment to re-engage with art, and that's what I feel a deep hunger for.
Yes.
So we've been also talking to colleagues in Europe, at the Gropiusbau in Berlin. Stephanie Rosenthal has timed openings, all of which were booked immediately. So I do think there's a hunger. How are things in Thaddeus Ropatch, Paris? Because you've reopened, haven't you?
Yes, we have reopened. Well, we've this week, in fact, today, Daniel Richter's exhibition So Long Daddy opens in Salzburg, which is very exciting and really good. Then in Habit, Anthony Gormley's exhibition at the Marais Gallery in Paris, it had 400 visitors 2 Saturdays ago, which is incredible.
Because it had been open one day or something.
Yes, exactly, and then had to close, which was just agonizing. I mean, there are so many examples of shows like that. Warhol at Tate, the amazing show at the National Gallery, and so on. There's an endless line. And then Monumental Minimal is also now open. So London will follow on June the 15th, which is great. And so, it really feels as though we're back. Yeah. But it remains to be seen exactly the degree. I mean, I hope we can follow Paris in the way that everybody's engaging with the exhibitions. But I also hope that there's something about this period when we've all been in lockdown. There's this kind of stillness. The city's still. Hopefully our homes are still. I feel much more kind of, centered. It was a rather sort of hippy-dippy word, but I feel quieter. And of course, that's an optimum way to look at art, to go and see exhibitions and look at art from that perspective. So I think it'll be wonderful those first few weeks and months of looking at art from having come out of the whole virus situation.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be a better time actually, because it won't be crowded.
Yes.
And I think it also reasserts this idea of art being a space for contemplation, not spectacle.
Yes.
I think the whole numbers game, we've just got to forget that, about crowding as many visitors as we can through our spaces. I think you're right, it's been a moment of reflection. I've actually tackled some of the towers of catalogues and art magazines that look guiltily at me every day. And just to have the opportunity to read and really reflect on what we do, why we do it, and what artists are doing and thinking has been an amazing opportunity. I think also the revival of nature and the amazing phenomena of, fish in Venice and the canals. We had 2 dragonflies in our kitchen here in London last week. I mean, it was just astonishing. And I really hope that we can change the way we live and work, because we have had a glimpse of paradise.
Yes.
Birdsong, insect revival, the wild goats chowing down on the edges of Llandudno. I mean, yes, please. I think that the sensitivity towards other species, towards the natural world, we've all been walking more, and also discovering locale. And I think that's going to have a bigger impact, because not only as everybody's finances have been absolutely hammered by this, it's also the case that we've got another issue behind all this, which is climate change. And I hope that we in the art world will slow down, and we will put together different ways of working. Perhaps someone's termed it hyperlocalism. Perhaps we should, spend less time running around the world and more time focusing on you know, what's near and what's more available to us. So I think sustainability is going to be the big issue.
I mean, the two words come to mind is to be more responsible, really. I mean, it's very, very simple. Just be consequent of your actions. And if in doubt, don't. I mean,
yes.
you know. Yeah. And also the exciting thing is that we've all learned that we can work from home, we can be connected, we can be with our families and yet still be professional people going about our business. And, you know, it'll be really interesting. I'd like to talk to you in 12 months' time and see how the art world is doing, how we are doing as people, and how we've actually, I hope, been able to hang on to some of the very special qualities of this time, whilst recognising that also for us it's been a privilege, but also for some people it's been utter hell, as we know. Yeah. And I mean, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, of course, the Whitechapel is cited in this extraordinary position. On the one hand, being part of Tower Hamlets, well, you're in Tower Hamlets, where I believe that children are not taught any art, nor are they taught any history of art. And then you're also completely, you know, within a stone's throw of the City of London, the great financial, one of the great financial capitals of the world. And the gallery has to survive. You're, you know, on the barricades every day for money and like everybody else. So people are saying it could be the worst financial crisis since World War II, on the one hand, and yet the gallery has to function. How are you going to negotiate this complicated terrain, or is it too early to ask that question?
Well, for the first part of what you've said, I think the emphasis on community has never been more important. And we have had to suspend, for example, our schools programme at a time, well, in physical time, we're of course switching all of that to digital. So I really feel it's a time when we have to be able to be open and work with local communities who are under tremendous stress. It is the case that apparently there's not one kid doing arts history A-level throughout the whole of the borough of Tower Hamlets. And that points to the fact that there has been a downgrading of the arts and humanities in the curriculum. I'm utterly opposed to the acronym of, what's it called, where they've taken it's science, English, maths and engineering or something, and technology. And I think that's been a crisis where the arts and humanities have been downgraded in education. We have an amazing group of teachers that we work with who are also opposed to that, but really it's quite a struggle to get priorities for children who want to pursue the arts, and actually also to persuade parents. And I think a lot of families are very hesitant about the arts as a profession for their kids. You know, they'll typically want them to be doctors, lawyers, accountants or pharmacists. And I think our job is to say to young people, there are huge possibilities within the arts to offer professional development and training. So actually, as part of that, we have a group called Duchamp and Sons, young people aged 15 to 20, 30 a year, and we are inviting them to be guest curators of the Hiscox collection, which will be on display this autumn. They will be choosing works and installing them, and through that process learning about the works of art, interviewing the artists, but also understanding what a collection is. And it's a very hard-working collection. This is one which is in office spaces. Yes. Thousands of employees look at these works of art every day in the Hiscox collection. And understanding why having art in the environment is a valuable thing, how curators work, but also how you might be a technician, how you install, conserve works of art, frame them, all the logistics of installing and creating an environment in which for the public to experience art. That's what we do, and we're hoping that some of that group will then go on to pursue through internship, traineeships and apprenticeships, will then go on that path towards becoming arts professionals. So I think community work, continuing to go to schools and showing children and young people that there is an amazing potential within the creative industries, now more than ever, I would say, and giving access to the institution, to young people, to different constituencies, to be part of what we do and contribute their perspective to what we do.
I mean, those sort of experiences, I remember my comparable experiences when I was a young adult, stay with you forever. And, you're giving an enormous opportunity, but also an incredible legacy in a way to the future lives. So even if they don't pursue the arts, it will be a touchstone that they can go back to and think, it could be, or it was. And also an incredible new window on the world. That's
Absolutely.
what we all need at that age, is a new window which says it doesn't have to be as it's been. It can be like this, and as a result of being like this, it can also be like that. And that's in a way what Damien did with Frieze. It's just, you can do what you want. The world is yours. Yeah. There is freedom here, and that's hugely thrilling. Yeah. And I want
sorry.
Please,
go ahead.
Please. I wanted to actually ask you, because I also have to keep an eye on the time. I can't believe it's 11:36. You've been at the Whitechapel now for 19 years, and it's developed greatly under your direction. Is there anything you still want to do there? And what do you see for your new window on the world? How is it going to change? Or maybe it's not.
Well, one of the aspects of the expanded Whitechapel, we doubled in size in 2009, was that we started working on many different platforms. So up until then, for over 100 years, we were essentially dedicated to either solo shows or group shows, very straightforward. But one thing that we never did before that was to commission new works of art. Mm-hmm. And that has really changed the way we work. It's changed our relationship with artists. And it's been an amazing journey over the last 10 years. We've commissioned, I think, 100 new works of art.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. That has been something of great pride for us. And it can range from the Max Mara commissions.
Yes.
And last year, of course, Helen Kamet was our winner and created an astonishing film, which then went on to get her nominated for the Turner Prize. This year, we have Carlos Bongo, who is of Angolan origin, but lives and works. He grew up in Portugal, lives and works in Barcelona. He's created an extraordinary environment, which, in a sequence of installations, really, draws on the fact that we occupy what was once a great library in a very particular part of London with very particular communities. And we have some beautiful images here of this. And he's been very influenced by the Shaker movement and how making can be, in their 19th century thought, a form of prayer. It's a form of, if you like, respect towards the material world, and it's a way of being in the world, to make things with your hand that are useful and beautiful. And I love that ethos. I love Carlos's transformation of these very humble materials like cardboard into this beautiful environment. So what I'd love to see is the Whitechapel Gallery, in a way, inspiring our audiences to become makers, to be creative, and to create new sustainable futures. We're entering a big post-industrial era. They're calling it the fourth industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. It's digital, but it's also moving towards AI, robotics. Yeah. And we're reading every day about factories closing, car manufacturers, having to shrink, steel manufacturing. All of these great, if you like, heavy industries are being transformed. And we've seen many communities in stress under crisis. I hope that what we can do with that commissioning program is show people that if they can shape their own destiny through creativity, through looking at art, being engaged with art. And over the last 2 years, we had a series of talks and a show about the rural, about communities outside the cities who often feel isolated and somehow left behind, not part of the national debate. And that was really exciting to see a situation where the environment, craftsmanship, community all come together. So we learned a lot from that. We learned from those communities and a group called My Villages who steered us through that. And I'd like to see the Whitechapel Gallery becoming a platform for making and for inspiring, new ways of living and being.
Well, I mean, that sounds incredibly exciting, and I shall look forward to visiting the Whitechapel and seeing that being played out over the coming months and indeed years. I have one wonderful image that I have to show, which is part of my research in preparation for this talk, which is this, this picture of where you spend Easter in the Californian desert, I think.
That's absolutely right.
Please, as the final, your final comment on, or final part of this discussion, please tell us about this, because it's incredible. It's called a palace, and why not? And anyway, everything is what you want it to be. So I am in Pappy and Harriet's Pioneer Town Palace. Tell us more.
So Pappy and Harriet's is in the middle of the desert in Joshua Tree, and in Southern California, very near Palm Springs. And it's a very strange place which was colonized in the 1950s by the Californian government. Decided that this was a great place to live, and they chopped up the desert into a gigantic grid of 5-acre parcels and took out ads in the National Geographic and said to people, come to the Californian desert, and if you build and if you live here, we will give you the land for free. So hundreds of people came, thousands, and built cabins, each on a 5-acre parcel in the desert, only to discover that in the summertime it is 45 degrees. There are rattlesnakes, there are scorpions, and there is no water. Or you have to dig wells to get the water. And as a consequence, it's an area of abandonment. There are many, many empty cabins there. And in fact, Rachel Whiteread has made a cast of one of the cabins. It's one of the most poignant and extraordinary works of hers I've ever seen. In this very strange place, there is also an abandoned town called Pioneer Town, which was a film set for a Western. And in the stockade next to that is the famous Pappy and Harriet's. By day, a barbecue joint for bikers, for Hells Angels, and by night, a music venue. And it has the most extraordinary roll call. Bob Dylan's played there. I mean, the most famous musicians in the world make it a point of honour to play at Pappy and Harriet's. So every year we visit Palm Springs to visit my partner's family, and every year we visit Pappy and Harriet's, Noah Purifoy's amazing sculpture installation, and a very dear friend and much respected artist, Andrea Zittel,
yes, of course,
whose high desert test site is in this vicinity. And in fact, we hope in November I'll be curating a show in the desert.
Oh, Iwona, how exciting!
And I hope that you'll all come,
Well,
if we're allowed to travel by then.
You've given it the best possible plug, and it sounds so amazing. Thank you so very, very much for joining me for tea. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest. Thank you for doing us the great honour of joining Instagram so you could be here today. It's brilliant. And I very much enjoyed my conversation with you. Thank you so much. And I wish you and the Whitechapel and all your colleagues the very, very best of luck as you reopen.
Thank you, Julia. And I can't wait to see Daniel's show and Anthony's show and everything that the Desiree Ropatch Gallery is going to give to us over the coming months. Very
Thank
exciting.
you so much. That's really great.
Thanks.
I'm going to now just sign off, if I may, and please leave if you don't want to be here for the end bit. I want to tell everybody that if you want to rewatch all the previous Teas with Julia, you can do so on our IGT TV or the YouTube channel. Today, as we've discussed, Daniel Richter's exhibition, So Long Daddy, is opening in our Salzburg gallery. For those of you who can't be there, please visit our website for an online viewing experience with immersive 360 degrees panoramic views. Next Saturday at 11 a.m. I will be having tea with the American artist Tom Sachs, who will be getting up in the middle of the night to be here to join us. Sachs's genre-defying mixed media sculptures, often recreations of modern icons using everyday materials, show all of the work that goes into producing an object, a reversal of modernization's trend towards cleaner, simpler and more perfect edges. Tom Sachs's work is in many international collections worldwide. I greatly look forward to seeing you next Saturday at 11 o'clock. And thank you again, Iwona. Bye.
Bye.